Welcome back to our channel. Today, we dive into the ruthless and cunning world of Henry I, a king whose ambition knew no bounds. Born as the youngest son of William the Conqueror, Henry was never expected to rule, but through sheer determination, political savvy, and relentless ambition, he outmaneuvered his rivals to seize the English throne. His reign was marked by brilliant reforms, brutal punishments, and a relentless pursuit of power. From imprisoning his own brother to enforcing some of the harshest penalties in medieval history, Henry I ruled with an iron fist. But despite his successes, his reign ended in chaos, with a succession crisis that plunged England into civil war. And in a twist of fate, this formidable king met his downfall not on the battlefield, but at the dinner table, all because of his obsession with one peculiar dish. Join us as we uncover the dramatic rise, ruthless rule, and bizarre demise of Henry I, history's most vengeful king. Henry I was never expected to wear the crown, yet destiny had different plans for the youngest son of William the Conqueror. Born around 1068 to 1069, likely in Selby, Yorkshire, he stood far down the line of succession behind his older brothers, including Robert Curthose, heir to Normandy, and William Rufus, the eventual King William II. However, when William the Conqueror passed away in 1087, family tensions flared. Robert and William Rufus jostled for power, leaving Henry a modest inheritance of silver and small tracts of land. Though it seemed an insignificant portion at the time, Henry skillfully maneuvered through these tumultuous years. He was not only clever in politics but also deeply educated, earning the nickname Beauclerk for his scholarly pursuits in Latin and the liberal arts, an unusual distinction in an age where most royal children focused solely on military and courtly training. Yet book learning alone did not propel Henry onto the throne. Circumstances and cunning played equal parts. In 1100, his brother William Rufus was killed under mysterious conditions during a hunting expedition in the New Forest. The infamous arrow that ended the king's life arrived at a strikingly convenient moment for Henry, who capitalized on William's sudden demise and had himself crowned King of England almost immediately. Despite accusations of conspiracy, Walter Tyrrell, the man who loosed the fatal arrow, fled the country. Modern historians generally view it as an accident. Regardless, Henry seized the moment, outmaneuvering his remaining brother Robert, then on crusade in the Holy Land. By consolidating the loyalty of key nobles and leveraging his own claim as the only son born while William the Conqueror was actually ruling England, Henry secured the crown he had once seemed least likely to wear. But while Henry's path to power is a fascinating tale of political savvy, his downfall was just as remarkable, if not downright bizarre. Despite the keen intellect and strategic mind that guided his reign, Henry had a shockingly stubborn streak when it came to his personal habits. Chroniclers of the time criticized his obsession with lampreys, an eel-like fish that attached itself to other creatures to suck their blood. Medieval courts prized lampreys for their rich, fatty flavor, yet they were notoriously heavy on the stomach, especially for older individuals. Henry's physicians practically begged him to cut down on his favorite dish, warning that such oily food posed a grave risk to his health. He brushed aside their concerns, convinced that he, who had wrested entire kingdoms, need not fear a mere fish. And so, in late November 1135, while dining lavishly on lampreys during a hunting trip, Henry overindulged once again. This time, his doctor's warnings came true with brutal swiftness. The king fell gravely ill and died on December 1, 1135, leaving behind a throne without a solid male heir. Henry's childhood was shaped by both extraordinary privilege and sudden upheaval, setting the stage for the determined ruler he would one day become. From the start, his mother Matilda, renowned for her devotion and intelligence, envisioned a future for her youngest son that revolved around deep scholarship rather than warfare, even hoping he might enter the clergy. Placing him under the tutelage of Osmond, the Bishop of Salisbury, she ensured Henry received the finest education of his time, mastering Latin and excelling in the liberal arts. This rigorous intellectual grounding would later earn him the moniker Beauclerk, or Good Scholar, a rare compliment in a medieval court where battle prowess typically overshadowed book learning. Nonetheless, Henry's aptitude for letters did not spark any genuine desire to don priestly robes, suggesting a hint of stubborn independence that would define much of his life. His early years were also marked by profound personal losses. At age 6, he watched his family grieve the untimely death of his older brother Richard in a hunting accident, an event that foreshadowed the fateful dangers of the royal pastime. Worse still, in 1087, Henry lost his father William the Conqueror, whose death dramatically reshaped the political landscape. With William's vast territories carved up among his heirs, Henry ended up with only silver and small parcels of land, while his elder brothers vied for Normandy and the English throne. Though this outcome might have seemed like a dead end, it instead forged Henry's resilience and fed his growing ambition. These early experiences, part scholarly grooming, part brutal reminder of life's fragility, laid the intellectual and emotional groundwork for a monarch who would later prove both diplomatically shrewd and unflinchingly resolute in pursuit of power. After William the Conqueror's passing, his carefully constructed empire shattered into 3 uneven pieces, each destined for a different son, and that division set the stage for a turbulent rivalry unlike anything the realm had seen. Robert Curthose, the eldest, gained Normandy, while William Rufus claimed England, leaving Henry, the youngest, with little more than a modest sum of silver and a pair of minor estates. Though it seemed Henry was relegated to the outskirts of power, he refused to surrender to obscurity. Seizing every opportunity, he navigated the delicate dance of sibling politics, carefully balancing between Robert, aggrieved by his meager share and intent on seizing the English throne, and William Rufus, who grew wary of both brothers' ambitions. Henry's initial strategy was neutrality, a stance that helped him avoid direct confrontation yet also left him walking a political tightrope, given his scattered assets in both Normandy and England. In a surprising twist, Robert himself tried to undercut William Rufus by buying off Henry with 3,000 silver marks in exchange for a slice of Norman land, a move that allowed Henry to demonstrate his remarkable leadership skills within that territory. The local nobility soon favored Henry's fair judgment and calm temperament, which only intensified Robert and William Rufus's mutual concern about their youngest brother's growing influence. This led to Henry's brief imprisonment in 1088, a short-lived setback reversed by the outcry of Norman lords who demanded his release. Ultimately, the seeds of profound rivalry were sown in these early power plays, as each brother sought to outmaneuver the others, setting a tone of distrust that would echo through the rest of Henry's ascent, and foreshadow the larger conflict still to come. When the year 1100 arrived, the balance of power among William the Conqueror's heirs shifted in a way few could have predicted, and Henry found himself in a remarkable position to seize the moment. Robert, preoccupied with his crusade in the Holy Land, had left England free of its most immediate rival claimant, while William Rufus, already King of England, decided to take Henry on a hunting trip to the notoriously dangerous New Forest. One fateful arrow, whether by accident or design, struck and killed William Rufus, and the shooter, Walter Tyrrell, fled the country at once, igniting endless whispers of foul play. Modern historians lean toward calling it a misfortune of the hunt, but for Henry, it was nothing short of an extraordinary twist of fate. Within hours, he saw the throne lying vacant and understood he needed to act without hesitation. Rather than wait for Robert's return, Henry rode to Winchester, secured the royal treasury, and proclaimed his right to rule as the only son born to a reigning king and queen, an argument he hoped would outweigh any claim Robert might press later. Backed by a group of influential noblemen and bolstered by paid mercenaries, Henry orchestrated a swift coronation at Westminster Abbey on August 5, 1100. This lightning-fast move wasn't just about opportunism, it reflected his keen political instincts and an awareness that whoever controlled the treasury and held London's favor stood the best chance of retaining the crown. While rumors of conspiracy swirled, Henry pressed forward, promising to uphold justice and right the perceived wrongs of William Rufus's reign, thereby winning over barons and clergy alike. In this pivotal moment, he demonstrated the strategic brilliance that would soon earn him both powerful allies and implacable foes, setting the tone for an eventful kingship that still captivates historians today. Henry's strategic marriage to Edith of Scotland, later crowned as Matilda, was a masterstroke that not only solidified his claim to the throne but also wove together two influential lineages, Norman and Anglo-Saxon, at a time when such unity was desperately needed. By marrying Edith in November 1100 at Westminster Abbey, Henry quickly consolidated support from the Scottish court and tapped into Edith's saintly heritage through her mother, Saint Margaret of Wessex, earning both political favor and moral prestige. Despite initial doubts, some questioned whether Edith had been under religious vows due to her upbringing in a convent. The marriage was ultimately sanctioned by key church figures, reinforcing Henry's legitimacy in the eyes of the barons. Edith's decision to adopt the Norman name Matilda upon her coronation showed her commitment to aligning with Henry's lineage, as well as her respect for his mother, Matilda of Flanders. Their union produced two legitimate children, Matilda and William, creating a clear path for succession. Unfortunately, William's tragic death aboard the White Ship in 1120 shattered these plans, sparking a succession crisis that would haunt the realm after Henry's death. Meanwhile, their daughter Matilda would emerge as a central figure in England's future struggles for the crown, setting the stage for the prolonged period of unrest later known as the Anarchy. Adding to the complexity of this royal household, Henry's reputation for prolific fatherhood outside of wedlock, over 24 illegitimate children by various mistresses, created an odd blend of political acumen and personal indiscretion. While his marriage to Edith, Matilda, signaled a calculated effort to unify the kingdom under one royal family, his numerous extramarital affairs revealed a king whose private life stood in stark contrast to his public quest for stability and order. This duality, Henry the cunning sovereign versus Henry the unapologetic philanderer, remains one of the most fascinating contradictions of his reign, highlighting how medieval rulers balanced genuine political strategy with complex personal entanglements. By 1101, Henry I's bold claim to the English throne faced its fiercest test when his older brother, Robert Curthose, returned from the Crusades to find his sibling firmly ensconced in power. Outraged and bolstered by a sizable army of Norman knights, Robert launched an invasion of England, determined to reclaim what he believed was rightfully his. Yet Henry, a shrewd politician renowned for quick thinking, surprised many by negotiating the Treaty of Alton rather than engaging in a costly, potentially ruinous war. Under its terms, Henry kept England but agreed to grant his brother a significant annual income and promised that, should he die childless, Robert would be recognized as the rightful heir. This uneasy accord momentarily cooled tensions, but the underlying distrust between the brothers never truly dissipated. Just 4 years later, with Robert's ambition reignited, Henry invaded Normandy in a preemptive strike. At the decisive Battle of Tinchebray in 1106, Henry's forces overwhelmed Robert's, showcasing not just military might, but also the organizational skill and alliances Henry had forged during his reign. Robert was captured and would spend the remainder of his life in captivity, a dramatic fate for a crusader once hailed for his bravery. By claiming Normandy outright, Henry achieved what their father, William the Conqueror, had once united, the rule of both England and Normandy under a single monarch. However, Henry's victories did not bring lasting peace. Robert's son, William Clito, twice led attempts to win back Normandy, but Henry crushed each rebellion, often through carefully cultivated support from local barons and a relentless campaign of fortification. The financial strain of these endeavors quickly mounted, forcing Henry to devise more sophisticated systems of taxation and record-keeping, early hints of the administrative reforms that would later earn him a reputation for strong governance. Still, the king's ongoing expenditure on warfare left many of his subjects grumbling under the weight of heavy levies. Despite such discontent, Henry's swift handling of rebel uprisings and his tenacious hold on both English and Norman territories served to confirm his status as a formidable ruler, solidifying a legacy defined by both conquest and clever statecraft. In December of 1124, King Henry I, often remembered for his uncompromising approach to law and order, summoned a special court at Winchester to confront a network of corruption rooted in the royal mints. Investigations soon revealed that nearly 94 moneyers, the very people responsible for producing currency, had been systematically debasing coins by mixing in cheaper metals and pocketing the difference. This was more than simple theft, it threatened the economic integrity of England at a time when trust in the monarchy's currency was crucial for trade and royal authority. Outraged by the scale of the fraud, Henry handed down gruesome punishments that would shock both his contemporaries and later generations. The convicted individuals had their right hands amputated, and, in many cases, also suffered castration. Symbolically, the mutilation of the right hand directly targeted the tool of their illicit craft, ensuring they could no longer continue debasing coins, while castration carried a grave mark of dishonor. Such extreme measures weren't arbitrary. Medieval justice was as much about public deterrence as it was about retribution. By displaying these harsh penalties before the realm, Henry demonstrated that he would brook no compromise when it came to the kingdom's financial stability. In the wake of these events, the circulation of corrupted currency sharply declined and merchants regained confidence in the value of English coins, fostering a renewed sense of security in commerce. Historically, this moment also underscored Henry's broader administrative reforms. He had a particular interest in strengthening royal finances, laying the groundwork for the more organized exchequer system that would develop in the years to come. And while modern audiences might find the severity of these sentences shocking, such brutal public justice was consistent with the medieval mindset. It served as a stark warning that undermining the economic foundation of the kingdom was a crime against both the crown and the wider community. Ultimately, this crackdown not only halted the rampant forgery but also reinforced Henry's reputation as a ruler determined to protect his reign from any threat, be it foreign invasion or the far subtler danger posed by unscrupulous moneyers. In late November of 1120, King Henry I of England faced an unimaginable catastrophe that would reverberate throughout his kingdom and echo for generations to come. The event, remembered as the tragedy of the White Ship, began on a cold and fateful night off the coast of Barfla in Normandy. Henry's court, eager to return to England, placed their hopes and trust in a magnificent new vessel under the command of Thomas Fitzstephen, a seaman proud of his family's long-standing service to the crown. In a bid to entertain the many nobles on board, Fitzstephen allowed an atmosphere of revelry and heavy drinking before departure, setting the stage for disaster. What made the White Ship's passenger list so remarkable was its sheer concentration of England's elite. Earls, knights, high-born ladies, and even members of the royal household crowded onto the vessel, most notably Henry's only legitimate son and heir, William Adelin. At only 17 years old, William had been carefully groomed to inherit his father's throne. He was already married to Matilda of Anjou, forming an important political alliance with the powerful county of Anjou, an alliance that King Henry believed would bolster the stability of his rule in both England and Normandy. When the knights' revelry gave way to impatience, a group of young nobles urged Fitzstephen to race ahead of the rest of the fleet. Some say the crew's judgment was hopelessly clouded by alcohol, others believe a reckless sense of pride drove them to push the ship beyond its limits. In truth, both factors likely played a part. Moments after the White Ship left the harbor, tragedy struck. The vessel collided violently with a hidden rock beneath the icy surface, tearing its hull and filling the lower decks with seawater. Panic swept over the drunken passengers as the ship began to sink with horrifying speed. Initially, fortune seemed to favor William Adelin. He managed to escape on a small lifeboat, a momentary glimpse of survival for the young heir. Yet, just as the craft pulled away, he heard the heart-wrenching screams of his half-sister, Matilda Fitzroy, left behind on the sinking ship. Overcome by duty, compassion, or both, William ordered his men to turn back, determined to save her. However, in the frenzy, desperate survivors attempted to climb aboard the lifeboat, causing it to capsize and hurl everyone into the frigid water. In that chaotic rush, the heir to the throne vanished beneath the waves. When dawn broke, the sole known survivor was a butcher named Birold. Clinging to a piece of debris through the night, he was finally rescued by fishermen who brought him ashore. Through his testimony, the gruesome details emerged. Nearly 300 people had been on board, and none but he escaped with their lives. News of the disaster devastated King Henry I. According to chroniclers, he never truly recovered from the loss. He had pinned his hopes for a stable succession on William, his only legitimate son. Although Henry had a daughter, also named Matilda, her position as a woman in a male-dominated society meant she faced intense resistance from the nobility. This question of rightful succession would ultimately plunge England and Normandy into what historians call the Anarchy, a prolonged period of civil war and turmoil after Henry's death. Yet the consequences of the White Ship tragedy went beyond the immediate loss of life and the collapse of King Henry's dynastic plans. It also exposed the fragility of medieval maritime travel, highlighting how quickly overconfidence could lead to ruin. Furthermore, the calamity underscored the precarious nature of political power in 12th century Europe. Alliances were often cemented by marriages and heirs, and with William gone, Henry's careful network of treaties was thrown into disarray. Noble families who had pledged loyalty to William were forced to reconsider their positions, fueling an atmosphere of uncertainty and tension. Henry I, the youngest son of William the Conqueror, had a legendary appetite for lavish banquets, none more so than those featuring his favorite dish, Lamprey, an eel-like creature with a strangely jawless mouth and parasitic tendencies. In medieval England, lampreys were considered an exquisite delicacy, prized for their rich, oily flesh and often prepared in elaborate sauces infused with wine, spices, and aromatic herbs. Henry's fascination with this peculiar fish went far beyond mere culinary preference. He insisted upon feasting on lampreys whether presiding over a grand banquet in a towering castle hall or traveling across his sprawling domains. Despite repeated cautions from royal physicians, who warned that excessive consumption of the heavy and fatty lampreys could be dangerous, especially for someone of Henry's age, he refused to moderate his obsession. In fact, lampreys had been a status symbol for the English elite for centuries, not only because they were difficult to catch and transport but also because their distinctive taste and texture set them apart from more common fish. Chefs at the royal court experimented with various cooking techniques, sometimes boiling lampreys in spiced wine or roasting them to create a crispy exterior while preserving the oily richness within. Yet, despite the opulent feasts and the undeniable prestige of lamprey dishes, the king's determination to indulge himself became a cautionary tale of heedless overindulgence, one that arguably contributed to his deteriorating health and, according to some accounts, may have hastened his death. By steadfastly ignoring his physician's dire warnings, Henry I's dangerous passion for lampreys ultimately cemented his place in history as a ruler who allowed his love of a single dish to overshadow common sense, exemplifying the indulgent excesses of medieval royalty. In the final days of November 1135, after nearly 3 decades of often brilliant, and sometimes ruthless, rule, Henry I once again indulged in his favorite dish of lampreys during a hunting trip, despite repeated warnings from his physicians about the perilous effects of overeating this oily fish. Within days, he fell gravely ill from severe abdominal complications and died on December 1, 1135, at Lyons-la-Forêt in Normandy. Although modern scholars debate whether his death stemmed from acute indigestion, food poisoning, or another ailment, Henry's unwavering devotion to lampreys became forever intertwined with his demise. More tragically for England, his passing left the realm without a clear male successor. His only legitimate son, William Adelin, had perished years earlier in the White Ship disaster of 1120. Henry had insisted that his barons swear fealty to his daughter, the Empress Matilda, but upon his death, his nephew Stephen of Blois seized the throne instead, igniting the prolonged civil war known as the Anarchy, 1135 to 1153. This conflict fractured the kingdom Henry had so carefully consolidated, plunging it into nearly 2 decades of shifting alliances, bitter sieges, and political turbulence, a stark contrast to the administrative reforms and relative stability of Henry's reign. Even his intended final resting place at Reading Abbey, founded by Henry himself, became shrouded in mystery over time, mirroring how the king's ambitious legacy and painstakingly built order dissolved into chaos soon after his fatal feast. Henry I's reign may have concluded in turmoil. His death in 1135 famously sparked a succession crisis and plunged England into a period of civil strife known as the Anarchy, but the administrative and financial groundwork he laid would resonate for centuries. Nicknamed the Lion of Justice, he introduced reforms that transformed the way England managed its finances, establishing more structured bookkeeping methods that evolved into the exchequer and inspiring the earliest pipe rolls, which meticulously recorded royal revenue. Equally significant were his efforts to standardize weights and measures across the realm, curbing fraud and creating fairer trade practices that, in turn, generated more reliable tax income. Although Henry's achievements brought greater unity and centralized power to medieval England, the chaos following his passing tended to overshadow these innovations. The White Ship tragedy of 1120, in which his heir William died, contributed heavily to the turmoil, leaving the kingdom contested between his daughter Matilda and his nephew Stephen. Even Henry's burial at Reading Abbey, a magnificent religious house he established in 1121, turned into an enduring puzzle. The precise location of his grave remains lost to time, reflecting a ruler whose monumental contributions were shrouded by the mayhem unleashed after his death, and by his famously insatiable craving for lamprey, a bizarre fixation that, according to lore, hastened his demise. Henry I's reign was a masterclass in power, strategy, and unforgiving rule. He conquered, reformed, and left an undeniable mark on England's history. Yet, for all his brilliance, his legacy remains overshadowed by the chaos that followed his death. His brutal punishments instilled fear, his financial reforms shaped governance, and his iron grip on Normandy secured his dynasty, at least for a time. But in the end, the king who outlived his brothers, outmaneuvered his enemies, and ruled with absolute authority was undone not by war or treachery, but by his own relentless appetite. His love for lampreys became the stuff of legend, forever linking his name to one of the strangest royal deaths in history. What do you think? Was Henry I a visionary ruler, a ruthless tyrant, or simply a victim of his own excess? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into medieval history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more fascinating stories from the past.